Bill Gates once promised the world could trust Microsoft with its most private information. But when more than half of existing personal computers were locked out of Windows 11 overnight, and a controversial AI update triggered a backlash that left even Bill Gates stunned, his entire legacy was suddenly on the line. How did a visionary's pursuit of trusted computing ignite one of the most divisive tech crises yet? The answer begins decades before the outrage. In 1975, a young Bill Gates co-founded Microsoft with the belief that personal computing could empower people everywhere. From the start, his vision was rooted in trust, software that would not just drive innovation, but earn the confidence of users who relied on it for their work, their communication, and their private lives. By the early 2000s, as the internet brought new threats and vulnerabilities, Gates recognized that trust could no longer be assumed. On January 15, 2002, he sent a company-wide memo titled Trustworthy Computing. In that memo, Gates declared that security, privacy, reliability, and availability must come before new features. He compared the responsibility of software makers to that of utilities, writing that computing is becoming critical to our lives, like electricity or water, and that Microsoft must lead the industry to a whole new level of trustworthiness. This memo was not just rhetoric. It triggered sweeping changes inside Microsoft, including security stand-downs, new development life cycles, and a culture where protecting users became a top priority. Gates made it clear that trust was not a marketing slogan, but the foundation of Microsoft's relationship with the world. For decades, this commitment shaped the company's reputation, setting a standard that every new product would be measured against. The echoes of that promise lingered long after Gates stepped back from daily leadership, creating a legacy that would be tested by every decision that followed. Windows 11 arrived with a promise of security and innovation. But for millions of loyal users, it delivered something else entirely, a locked door. Microsoft's new requirements, Trusted Platform Module 2.0, Secure Boot, and modern processors meant that entire generations of personal computers, still capable by every measure, were suddenly declared obsolete. The company's own compatibility tool failed more than half the time. Analyst estimates and user reports suggested that nearly 52% of existing Windows machines did not meet the new standard, leaving hundreds of millions without a supported path forward. For many, this was not just a technical hurdle. It was a breaking point. Small business owners, schools, and families found that devices purchased just a few years earlier were now stranded. In forums and support calls, the frustration was palpable. One information technology manager described, "Watching a fleet of reliable laptops, barely out of warranty, fail the upgrade check in a matter of seconds." The sense of exclusion went beyond inconvenience. It felt like a betrayal of the promise that computing should empower, not exclude. This decision, framed as a move to strengthen security, was seen by critics as forced obsolescence, a push to drive hardware sales at the expense of user trust. The backlash grew, with social media filling up with screenshots of failed upgrades and angry threads. The ideals of trust and reliability, once championed from the top, now collided with a corporate policy that left millions behind. Recall arrived as the centerpiece of Windows 11's next wave, a feature that promised to make memory itself searchable. Every few seconds, Recall quietly captured a snapshot of whatever appeared on the screen, from spreadsheets and emails to private messages and personal documents. These images, Microsoft claimed, never left the device. They were stored locally, encrypted, and accessible only through Windows Hello or a PIN. Yet for privacy advocates and everyday users alike, the reassurance rang hollow. The idea of a running diary of every action, saved without obvious warning, felt less like convenience and more like surveillance. Technical blogs dissected Recall's design. Snapshots were indexed by on-device AI, creating a timeline users could search with plain language. For example, show me last month's tax forms or find the chat about the meeting. Microsoft insisted that sensitive data, bank details, passwords, private browsing would be filtered out before storage. But critics pointed to gaps, the lack of independent audits, the risk of malware targeting the encrypted database, and the possibility of someone bypassing protections with physical access or a guest PIN. Forums filled with anxious questions. Could a stolen laptop expose months of work and personal conversations? Was it possible to truly erase the record, or would traces remain? Even with encryption and opt-in controls, the sense of being watched by one's own computer unsettled many. Privacy groups called for more transparency, demanding clear options to disable Recall entirely. For some, the feature crossed a line, transforming a trusted tool into a silent observer and turning the abstract promise of AI into a daily, tangible threat. government agencies moved quickly to contain the perceived threat posed by Windows 11's new AI features. In March 2024, the U.S. House Cybersecurity Office issued a directive banning Copilot from all congressional computers, calling it an unacceptable risk to sensitive data. Similar decisions rippled across the public sector, with European regulators ordering data impact assessments and several ministries freezing further Windows 11 deployments until privacy reviews could be completed. Large corporations followed suit. By the summer of 2025, multiple Fortune 500 companies had blocked Copilot and Recall on their networks, citing unresolved concerns over data retention and AI-driven monitoring. IT leaders in these organizations pointed to the lack of independent audits and the risk of confidential information being indexed or exposed, even if stored locally. The policy moves had immediate effects. Procurement teams halted new Windows 11 device purchases, and entire upgrade projects were suspended. Internal memos circulated among major banks, healthcare providers, and law firms, advising staff to remain on Windows 10 or seek alternatives. The scale of resistance became clear in telemetry data. Over 500 million devices worldwide stayed on Windows 10, despite mounting pressure from Microsoft's to upgrade ahead of the October 2025 end-of-support deadline. Migration to alternative platforms, including Linux and Mac OS, saw a sharp uptick among businesses that once relied on Microsoft's promise of trust. For many IT directors, the decision was not just about features or cost, but about protecting the integrity of their organizations in the face of untested AI. The backlash was no longer just a matter of online outrage. It had become a global policy revolt, forcing Microsoft's leadership into the spotlight. Satya Nadella stepped in front of the backlash with a message that was equal parts reassurance and resolve. He said Microsoft had made hard choices to protect users in a world where digital threats were growing more sophisticated every year. The new hardware requirements, the integration of AI, and the push for on-device security were not arbitrary hurdles. They were necessary shields. Nadella pointed to the rise in ransomware, the surge in phishing attacks, and the need for a foundation that could withstand what he called the next wave of cyber risk. Yet inside the company, echoes of Bill Gates' original vision lingered. In 2023, Gates reflected that innovations often create new risks that need to be controlled. He said the challenge is to move fast, but not break what people trust. For Gates, the idea that software should serve users, never the other way around, remained non-negotiable. The tension was unmistakable. On one side, Nadella's defense of a bolder, more defensive Windows, and on the other, Gates' insistence that trust and empowerment could not be sacrificed, even in the name of progress. The company he built now faced a reckoning between its founders' ideals and its current path. Apple and Google, facing the same wave of AI innovation, chose a different path. Tim Cook stood before developers in Cupertino and declared that privacy was a fundamental human right. Apple's approach to AI features in macOS and iOS kept sensitive data on the device, protected by hardware enclaves, and left users in control of what was shared, even if it meant rolling out new tools more slowly. Sundar Pichai, leading Google, charted a cautious course as well. Privacy dashboards, granular permissions, and transparent data practices became central to Android's AI ambitions. Both companies, while not without their critics, made public their commitments to independent audits and regulatory compliance before expanding AI features across their platforms. Outside the boardrooms, voices from the AI ethics community grew louder. Timnit Gebru, a leading researcher, warned that unleashing powerful AI without robust oversight invites harm, especially when user consent is murky or absent. Gary Marcus called Microsoft's rollout reckless, arguing that the rush to outpace competitors had left basic questions of safety and accountability unanswered. For these experts, the issue was not just technical risk, but a breach of the social contract that tech companies had with the public. The verdict was clear. In the drive to dominate the next era of computing, Microsoft had crossed a line its rivals had not. Today, more than 500 million devices still resist upgrading to Windows 11. As AI reshapes digital life, the trust that built Microsoft hangs in the balance. The next move, by companies or users, will decide who controls our privacy. In this new era, vigilance is no longer optional.